The most remarkable thing about Ross is, I mean, both of those attempts, someone else had said, we've got to call it here based on medical advice because your kidneys are shutting down, hypothermia, so on. And both times, his girlfriend, friends have attested this, Ross is laughing and smiling. Partly hallucination, but also partly to the remarkable personality and who Ross is. "72 hours ago, Ross was sitting in hospital, and 72 seconds ago, I was sitting at lunch." So this will be interesting. I first came across Ross, discovered probably 6-7 years ago, talking about health, fitness, training, and as you'd have it, and happens very often on my Instagram feed, started showing up Ross Hedgley, doing all sorts of insane things, running barefoot across mountain ranges in Scotland. He did what he called the triathlon, where he carried a 50-kilogram log on his back and swam with it, ran with it, rode a bike with it, climbed a rope continuously for how many hours?
It took 19 in the end, yeah, the height of Everest.
Until he had climbed the height of Mount Everest. Towed a car around Silverstone racetrack for 24 hours. Swam around Great Britain for six months, 6 hours on, 6 hours off. Didn't touch land for 6 months. And then more recently has attempted the world's longest swim, has had 2 attempts at it. Anyway, Ross, talk about the most recent, these 2 swims, but most recently what had happened.
Yeah. So we've had a crack now at the world's longest swim a few times, which is around 170 kilometers. The first one I tried in Loch Ness. It was about 5 degrees. About 53 hours in, started hallucinating. Didn't entirely go to plan. I thought it was going well, and then I woke up in hospital, saw my mum and girlfriend at the head of the bed, and I was like, it's not gone well, has it? No. So we decided we needed somewhere warm, so we went to Lake Trasimeno in Italy. Again, seemed like a good idea on paper. Went out there. For those who know, just last week, we basically got an anti-cyclone coming from the Sahara Desert. So it was about 44 degrees air temperature, about 33, 34 degrees in the water, which is kind of like a jacuzzi, kind of swimming in a jacuzzi with the wind as well. It was like swimming in a warm bowl of soup, like a turbulent...
Dead fish were literally floating around you, right?
Yeah, that was right. Yeah, so I was avoiding dead fish that had been boiled, basically, as well, which I knew wasn't a good sign. We managed to do 70 kilometers, which was good. It wasn't the goal. But as Chris said, it was about 72 hours ago now, in hospital on drips and stuff like that. But had to come here.
That's the most remarkable thing about Ross is, I mean, both of those attempts, someone else had said, we've got to call it here based on medical advice because your kidneys are shutting down, hypothermia, so on. And both times, his girlfriend, friends have attested this, Ross is laughing and smiling. Partly hallucination, but also partly to the remarkable personality and who Ross is. And this is what I want to ask, is the why you do these insane things and how it is that you push through seemingly impossible situations, scenarios, pain, exhaustion, so on, with a smile on your face.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because 72 hours ago I was asking myself exactly the same question when I was in hospital and swimming past dead fish as well. And I'm trying to sort of unpack it, and this is the conclusion that I've come to, and I hope this can help anybody sort of sitting here now. But I read a lot of ancient Greek mythology, and there was this one story, the myth of Sisyphus. For those who might be familiar with this, but basically Sisyphus was considered to be the cleverest man to ever exist, and he really annoyed the gods because he was just so clever. There was one incident where he managed to chain up Death. Death came along to collect him, and he said, "Oh my God, look at those chains, how do they work?" And Death went, "Oh, here you go, you put them on," and then he goes, "Ah," and then ran off, and then Death was chained up. The problem is wars were being fought, people were just weren't dying, and this really annoyed Zeus and Hades because they weren't getting any new souls into the underworld. So anyway, what happened is then eventually old age caught up with Sisyphus and he had to die. But he turned to his wife and he said, "Look, don't give me a proper burial, because if you don't give me a proper burial, I can go down, have a word with Hades and go, look, didn't get a proper burial, didn't get the coins over my eyes, so I couldn't cross the river Styx, so you've got to let me go back and have a proper burial." So he convinced Hades to let him go back and do this, and he was like, "Aha, got you again." lives a long and happy life. He's just chilling, he's a king, he's having a brilliant time until he eventually realizes, I've got to die, I need to go and face up to what I've done. But by which point, Zeus was so pissed at him. And Zeus basically just said, look, what I'm going to get you to do to punish you is I'm going to get you to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. And as it just gets to the top of the hill, it's going to roll back down. This futile task that you're never going to be able to complete. But this is the part I love. Albert Camus, who's a French philosopher, basically said, the thing is here is you can imagine Sisyphus outsmarting the gods one more time if you imagine him smiling whilst doing this futile task. And this one point I love, he said, because if you understand that, you understand that the struggle alone is enough to fill a person's heart. And so I think with me attempting swims, doing it round again, just going round lakes, in many ways, Sisyphus, as Albert Camus said, he's this absurd hero that he's able to just keep going, because the struggle alone is enough to fill one's heart. And I think that is the best I can do when someone says to me, why? It's just that's my boulder. And I think everybody here has a boulder. Yeah, records are nice and everything like that, but the struggle alone is enough to fill a person's heart.
Wonderful. This is, I think, what has, we've had a wonderful friendship for many years now. And those kind of stories and quotes from every single philosopher and amazing thinker through time. Ross, the recall is phenomenal, and also the specific nature of what that quote has to do with what we're doing. We'd be in the gym, going through a set or training, and he'd reference one of these individuals. I'm like, oh, that's a good thing to think about. And then all of a sudden, I'm not thinking about the pain, I'm thinking about something else. And so the mastery of mind and body has been something that has been beyond impressive for me. That for you also, you talked about, I think, through Greek philosophy, you want to talk about that, the mastery of the mind and the body, not one or the other?
Yeah, do you know what? It's exactly that. Yeah, so the ancient Greeks thought exactly that. So often they had this term which was just being a sort of a savage scholar, this idea of being, a man of kind of physical excellence, but also mental aptitude at the same time. And I think so often we kind of forget that. You're kind of a bit of a book nerd or you're kind of a jock, and, never should the two worlds kind of cross over. Whereas I think that's something that certainly in our training sessions, we always try to kind of embody that when we're doing sled sessions, pushing like a 200-kilo sled in the sun, in the Byron heat, 40 degrees. It's interesting how we'll flip between the two, because I know with me and Chris, when we're doing a session like that, or when we were training for rope climbs, for instance, this was a great example, or ice swims in Norway, that so often when Chris was doing ice swims, which was completely alien to his physiology as well, because I know you were there sort of like ripped, lean, looked good, terrible for ice swimming. So I think sometimes it's amazing to be able to talk about philosophy and various things like that. And I can say, this is your boulder. Remember Sisyphus. But then other times, it actually comes from something far more primitive. So I always like looking at a lot of animals where they will just basically fight to the death when they're just in that like fight or flight. They get what's called stress-induced analgesia, where if animal is caught in a trap, it will just basically bite its own arm off and just keep on fighting. And I think sometimes it's knowing when to flip between the two, because certainly with ice swims, or when Chris is encouraging me, it's knowing when to quote Sisyphus, and it's knowing when to just be a honey badger, biting your own arm off and continuing to fight.
Do you think in those situations, is it automatic for you? Has it always been that way? Or have you trained yourself or conditioned your body to, when faced with adversity, challenge, pain, to go, no, smile through it? What is it? Is it a taught experience or something you're born with?
That is a great question, just because I think only now we're sort of understanding fatigue and kind of a lot of mental obstacles. For instance, so when we talk about the psychobiological model of fatigue, basically it's this idea that we're far more powerful than our own minds allow us to believe. So a great example is if right now we all set off and we all said, let's go and run a marathon, that at 17 miles in, you might hit the wall, muscle glycogen's depleted, blood sugar levels are low, everything, you might be overheating. And you're just like, I cannot go on. My lungs are burning, my legs are on fire, I cannot go on. But then you'll notice that all of a sudden, if you continue with a mile left, family, friends are clapping, and then all of a sudden you get a second wind and you're able to run. It's like, well, hang on. You said at 17 miles you're completely done. So how are you able now to keep going? And it's basically this idea that they call this central governor theory, Tim Noakes, that basically said the brain is like a hypochondriac. So as things start to get really bad, if you're too cold from an ice swim, you're overheating, the brain just says, whoa, what are you doing? Pull the physiological handbrake. Stop yourself from doing harm to yourself. But if you repeatedly learn how to override that, then all of a sudden you realize that you are far more powerful than your own mind allows you to believe. And it constantly comes up time and time again that then when you're on a rower, swimming, whatever it is, you just go, I know what's going on. I know my brain's being a hypochondriac. I know I can push on. Granted, I want to caveat that with, in Loch Ness, I was swimming going, I'm far more powerful than my mind allows me to believe, and woke up in hospital. But I'm, like I said, probably an extreme example. I think most people, the lesson you can take away there is, yeah, when your brain actually tells you to stop, like to pull that physiological handbrake, in reality, you've actually got far more.
Yeah, I remember talking to big wave surfers about that, and they said that feeling, the give up, when you're underwater, you're only about 40% through. And again, it's teaching yourself, there's a self-preservation of the body, saying we're going to die here, but overriding the fact that you've got a lot more in the tank.
That is, oh, yeah.
Here he is.
Yeah.
So how heavy, tell us, this is the
God.
swim around Great Britain, right?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, me and you talk about this a lot when we're training, because I don't love this picture.
I love this picture.
That was post Loch Ness, and the medic said he's never seen feet on a live person like that colour. They were worse in Italy. But what I love about this, and we talk about this a lot when we're training, so again, not to go too much on the science side of things, but Hans Selye, 1936, Hungarian physician, basically he came up with this idea that was, if you gave a rat a lethal dose of poison, these lab rats, they'll keel over and die. But by giving them a little bit of poison, a little bit more, this stress, this stimuli, they build up this intolerance to it. And then essentially he just created this lab full of just indestructible lab rats that were just having poison for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I think what I love about this is this was the GB swim. So it was 157 days, 6 hours on, 6 hours off, all the way around Great Britain. So it was this idea of stress and stimuli, Hans Selye, a little bit of poison, a little bit more. And essentially that is an indestructible lab rat, which is so although that picture, it looks gruesome, it's something that I was incredibly proud of, because at that moment in time, my eyes as well are just sleep deprived and swollen just from jellyfish. But at that point, it's kind of like you're pretty much unbreakable at that point.
What are you thinking about through those swims? And when you were training at my house for one of the swims, you're doing 12 hours a day in the pool, and we'd come and go, and he's still in there, and a bowl of porridge on the side. Do you go into a meditative state? Is there you hear about distance runners saying there's just a sense of freedom and the flow state. Do you fluctuate from that into what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
That's a great question, because you do flip between the two. That sometimes it's really easy to talk here about, you want to turn off, you want to just like switch off the brain, think and be anywhere else. However, again, as hard as that was and as hard as Loch Ness was, sometimes you actually want to be incredibly present, because it's a privilege to do these sorts of things. So all of a sudden, it's very easy oh God, it's very easy to talk about the hardship, and you look at those pictures. But then equally, there were some beautiful moments in there as well. For instance, swimming around Great Britain, because I was in the water for so long, all of the sea life just became so accustomed to me. So all of a sudden, I've got minke whales adopting me, thinking that I'm like an injured seal, and they're guiding me to Bristol. Seal colonies, again, coming over, just really intuitive to wonder what I was. So it's only through this sort of hardship that you get to experience things like that, which I know is something that me and you talk about with Aristotle's work. Again, sort of just a slightly sidetracked, but Aristotle had this brilliant term, because he felt that happiness was a bit of a bad word. He said it was kind of like, it was flawed, it kind of came up short. We shouldn't strive to be happy, it should be something else. And so he sat there and he thought about it, and he said, I like this term, I like eudaimonia. And eudaimonia is basically happiness with fulfillment. He believes that happiness should come with suffering, with struggling, because that's just so much more filling. It's better than being happy. If you're happy, if I gave somebody right now £1 million, you'd be happy, but that's not eudaimonia. But if you earned £1 million through writing a book, starting a business, winning an event or something like that, that's eudaimonia, and that's the difference. So I think, again, it's really easy to look at those and sort of ask, why would anybody want to put themselves through that? And certainly for the last 2 attempts at the world's longest swim, I haven't got any happiness or sense of eudaimonia, really. But I know if there is a third attempt, there probably will be,
Yeah.
that eudaimonia afterwards will be amazing.
The other thing also, these have been about personal fulfillment and your boulder, as you put it, sense of purpose. But everything you've done has also been geared around different charities each time. Maybe speak to that a bit.
Yeah, do you know what? That's a great point, just because, again, as a bit of a guiding principle, I've sort of, like, with all of these events, they've needed, like, an operating system, a guiding principle, a sort of a moral compass as to why they do them. And we speak a lot about your ikigai, Japanese philosophy, which people might be familiar with. And it's just basically your reason for being, why you get up in the morning. And it's made up of 4 things: what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. And I think with anything, any hobby, any sport, a job, whatever it is, if it fulfills those 4 things, it's basically going to result in you lifting that boulder, in eudaimonia. And I think for so long, a lot of my events were a mix of those, in that if you're not paid for it, you kind of become a bit of a martyr and it's not sustainable. So you need that. Are you good at it? Yeah, kind of good at swimming. I could be better by those pictures. And what the world needs. And that what the world needs was such a big part as well, in terms of, like, in those dark moments, you need a pretty big reason to continue. And if it's for a charity, if it's for a higher purpose, it serves as such a motivating factor outside of everything that I've just described just now, knowing that there are just thousands of people, thousands of pounds on the line. That will serve as a pretty powerful motivator.
We talked about the book, The Second Mountain. I think Terry Brooks written, and remember the first mountain being the one that it's self-fulfilling. It's about my goal, my thing, my journey is. Get to the mountain, people end up back in the valley and go, oh, that didn't really tick the boxes or fulfill what I wanted. Second mountain becomes about servitude to something outside yourself. And as you say, far more fulfilling. Do you find each time you complete one of these events or attempt them, do you very quickly fall back into the valley and go, what's next? Or are you at a more fulfilled space now than you were, say, 10 years ago when you were beginning?
Sure. The reason that's such a good question is because it almost relates to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So for those not familiar, it's just kind of the pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the bottom, human needs, behavior, everything's dictated by this hierarchy he proposed. And at the bottom, it was this idea that all you really want is just food, shelter, warmth, oxygen. That's what you need. And as you move up, you start to get family, friends. So, moving up the ladder there, that's more fulfilling. And then what drives behavior as you go up is more job security, things like that. And then as you move up, then it's feelings of prestige, accomplishment. But as you just said there, at the very top, that's when you start to get into philanthropy, and that's when you start looking at a much bigger picture. However, what's really interesting is I've always found on some of these swims, obviously, I'm kind of motivated at the bottom here, which is just food. I'm trying to keep my head above water. It's oxygen. But what can get really interesting is Maslow's hierarchy almost flips, in that food, warmth, everything like that in Loch Ness kind of became less important because I was trying to achieve the top, which is philanthropy, putting something out there, self-actualization, as he calls it, and actually just doing something that leaves a lasting legacy. So you almost go, I don't mind the warmth and food as much as long as we achieve something.
Yeah, fantastic. What is next for you? At this point of your life, for all of us, I look and go, it's a superhuman individual who is unbreakable. Are you feeling the vulnerabilities and the restrictions more, or do you feel there is more education and skill here than you've ever had, therefore the combination of that and the body, you feel like continue on, power on to the next and bigger?
Yeah, I think what's been interesting on these last few as well, and when I say this, like with ultramarathon swimming, it's just not an individual sport. And I think, like I said, I've only had 72 hours since leaving hospital. But what's been amazing is just the way that my support network has picked me up.
Yeah.
And already, I think, rather than dwelling on anything, I almost try to plan and program myself a solution. And I think what's been brilliant is sitting with a lot of family, friends. Already we're looking at what went wrong and how you rectify it. And again, the only way I can describe it is just the struggle alone is enough to fill one's heart. So if we go for a third attempt and it's not successful, there will be a fourth. We'll just keep going until we get that eudaimonia, and then rinse and repeat. There'll be another mountain.
Fantastic. Ross, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You legend. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.